Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's session. And today we will be discussing about Azure tools. And we have Kazim today with us to talk about it, and he'll be explaining about it. And he's also a LinkedIn instructor and a MVP. So let us hear from him.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Just want to be sure that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, awesome. Um, Let me share my screen real quick. All right, so you're welcome once again. My name is Kazim Adegwega, and today I'm going to be walking you through today's topic, Azure Administration Tools. So like you rightly mentioned, I'm a Microsoft Azure MVP. I'm also a Microsoft Certified Trainer. I'm based in Nigeria. I currently work for Icon Systems, and you can connect with me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is Kazim Can Teach, and you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can look me up on LinkedIn using my full name, Kazim Adegwega. And I also run some podcasts. One is Tech Talk with Kazim, and the other I run with my friend Samuel Eskin, where we try to showcase the best of Africa to the world. So that you can also look up the content on that one. It's Africa Talks Tech. All right, so this is the agenda that we're going to be running through today. We're going to kick things off with introduction to Azure admin tools. We'll look at the Azure Portal, and we'll also look at the Azure PowerShell, and we'll wrap things up with the Azure CLI. All right, so introduction to Azure admin tools. There are a lot
I'm
of
sorry to
ways to make.
interrupt, Kazim, but
Okay.
I think your voice is breaking. It's a kind of a little bit hard to understand
Oh,
sentences. Is there any issue on your network, or is it on a mic?
okay, let me see. Let me try to adjust the mic. Can you hear me okay now?
Yes, sounds
Okay,
good.
awesome. All right, yeah. All right, so introduction to Azure admin tools. So I said that there are a number of ways of managing Microsoft Azure, right? Four major tools that we can use include the Azure Portal, we have the CLI, there's PowerShell, there's ARM templates. There are other tools that we can use. For example, if you like to manage Azure on your mobile device, there's the Azure mobile app that you can as well download. But today we're going to be focusing on three of these tools, and that will include the portal, the CLI, and PowerShell. All right, so just before we delve in proper, it's important for me to quickly mention this, talk about the Azure Resource Manager. The Azure Resource Manager ARM is an Azure service that helps you to manage and deploy your Azure services through a consistent layer, right? So it is important that I mention this because you need to understand that everything that you're going to be doing on Azure, whether you're going to be doing it through the portal or through the CLI or through PowerShell, happens through the Azure Resource Manager. So you need to keep that in mind. On Azure, you have services running on Azure. You have your resources up on Azure. So you will need to connect to spin up those services, to manage those services. So there are all these different tools that you can connect via your SDK, but they all need to go through the ARM. So just keep that in mind. All right. So let's kick things off then with the Azure Portal. The Azure Portal is the most popular tool that you find people use for managing Azure, right? So it's a web-based portal, and you can access it via the portal.azure.com URL. Right, let me show you that real quick. All right, so here is what the portal looks like. So if you're new to this, you will just need to spin up a web browser and type in portal.azure.com. Of course, you need to have an Azure account in order for you to be able to run services up on Azure. So I have one here. So this is what the portal looks like. Let me do a quick walkthrough of the portal. Here you have your search. So the search is very useful, especially when you can't find your way around, or when you can't find the particular thing that you're looking for, but you happen to know the name, right? So you can look it up via the search. So you can search for anything that you want on Azure via the search. Next to the search, you have the Cloud Shell, right? So the Cloud Shell is a command line interface where you can type in your PowerShell commandlets, your CLI commands, and your Bash shell commands, if you will. That's if you're coming from a Linux, Unix background, right? So if it's the first time that you're going to be using this, by the way, it's going to prompt you to set up a storage account. So you need to set up a storage account and mount it if you're doing it for the very first time. So we'll come back to this much later on. Next, you have the notification, right? So notification helps you keep track of the things that you're doing up in Azure. So if I'm spinning up a service, I'm trying to delete a resource in Azure, so you should expect to get notification of what's going on, the progress of things via the notification icon. And there's also the settings icon, right? So the settings icon would enable you to, let me close out the shell for now. All right, so the settings icon is going to enable you do things like switching between directories. So when you have multiple directories, you are able to switch between those directories via the settings icon here. There are times when you might also want to customize the look and feel of your Azure portal. So you can also do that from here. So if I click on appearance, for example, you see I can change my menu, my Azure portal menu behavior. I can change the theme, right? To this theme if I want. I can change it to a darker theme if I wish. So you can simply customize your Azure look and feel to your heart content from here. Another one that you have here is support and troubleshooting. So if you're running into any kind of issues, so you can try to raise a support ticket from here, right? For example, I have an Azure free account, right, as a Microsoft MVP. So we get some free accounts that we use to run services, right? A few days back, I ran into some issues with my account, right? It was disabled for some reason. So, but yesterday I noticed it and I was able to just quickly generate a ticket from there, right? So you have your support, and here you have your feedback. So feedback is useful when you have feedback for Microsoft, right, about Azure. So you can put up your feedback here and let Microsoft have the feedback, right? So Microsoft, of course, they're very people-centric, so you can be sure that Microsoft is going to respond to those or act on those feedbacks when they get them, right? And here you have the user that you're currently logged in as, right? So depending on which of the user that you're logged in with, you will be able to carry out certain tasks, right? Or be restricted from performing certain tasks. So if you're logged in as a particular user and you're wondering why you can't do certain things, so it might be because of the permission, right? Um, the access or the control that you have on that user. So you might need to change the user to a more privileged user, right? So right now I'm logged in as the global administrator for this particular tenant, right? And one last one here is, when you move to the very left of the screen, the top left of the screen here, you have this pane, so once I click on the three lines, so you can see that from here, we're able to do a number of things. We're able to do a whole lot of things from here, like view the resources that we have. So if I want to view all resources, so I can click on it and, I get to see all the different resources that I've provisioned. I can view all the services that Azure has on display. So if I want to check out list of services that we have up on Azure, so Microsoft Azure, they've done a very great job of categorizing them very nicely, right? So if the resource that you're looking to create is compute related, like that is you're looking to create virtual machines, you're looking to create a skill set, availability set, all those are compute related. So you find that under compute, right? So if you want to create network related objects or resources like your load balancer, your NSG, so on and so forth, you find that under networking, right? So if you're looking to create things, you can create them from here. So this is also another very powerful tool. So let's look at how to create something real quick here in Azure. And how about we go back to all resources. And let me mention this real quick as well, because I presume that most of the people on the call are newbies, right? So it's a 100 level topic that we're talking about today. So something that is important for you to note is that when you want to create resources on Azure, you need to put them inside what is called resource group, right? Resource group. So it's best practice that you create your resource group first before going ahead to create your resources. So even though it is possible, right, when you create your resource to create a resource group on the fly, then, but if you are, if you like to have things more structured, then you probably want to just create a resource group first before going ahead to create your services. And here is how you create one, by the way. So you click here and you see resource group from here. Another thing I want to mention quickly before I show you how to create a resource is that for you to create resources on Azure, you need to have a valid subscription. So without a subscription, you're not going to be able to create resources, because subscription is how Microsoft bill their customers, right? So you're going to get billed based on the subscription type that you have. So there are different subscription types. And if you're wondering, or you want to ask this question, that but I'm a student, I don't I don't think I'm going to learn Azure and then start burning credit already, start spending my dollars already. Well, there are ways around it. So you can simply try to set up a free trial account. So your trial account will come with a $200 credit for you to use for a period of 30 days. So whichever one comes first, either you run out the $200 before the 30 days, but maximum you have 30 days to use your $200. There's even a student, if you can prove that you're a student, then you can also sign up, as a student. So the number of subscriptions that you can choose from. So just try to also keep that in mind, that if you don't have a valid subscription, you're not going to be able to create any resource on Azure. The only thing you're going to be able to create, by the way, would be resource group. So which I want to show you how to create now. So come to resource group and I'll click on create. Good. So you see, everything starts with a subscription. So you always need to have a valid subscription. So I have a subscription that I want to use for this purpose, for the purpose of this session. So it's an Azure Pass subscription. So I'm going to select that and give my resource group a name. So how about I call this test? And you also need to choose a region, right? When you're creating things on Azure, you're creating resources on Azure, you want to put them, which region are they going to reside in? Microsoft Azure has many data centers across the world. So we have data center in Africa, we have data center in Asia, there's US, there's Europe. You get the picture. So you need to define where you want your resources to be located, right? It's best practice that you choose a region that is closest to you, so that you won't run into latency issues, right? And you also spend a little less with regards to bandwidth. So keep that in mind as well. When you're choosing your region, choose a region that is closest to you. But sometimes, you might have a requirement or compliance constraints that would define which region you're going to be hosting your resources. So you also always need to choose a region. So I'm going to choose a region here. It doesn't matter which one I choose at this time, and go ahead and create. If you want, you can try to tag your resources. Any resource you can tag, resource group, you can tag it as well, right? So for easier identification. For instance, when I tag my resource, I'm able to tell things like which department this resource belongs to, who is the owner of this particular resource, right? So I can append metadata information to those resources via tags, right? So that's what tag is used for. So I'm just going to let that pass right now and go ahead and create this resource group, right? One thing you also notice when you want to create a resource up on Azure is that the portal is going to attempt to validate things ahead of time, right? So it's similar to, there's something I'm going to show you when you're doing PowerShell, right? So you want to test out what a command, is going to do without necessarily executing that command. So you can work with what if, right? So you're not very sure, but you just want to get a glimpse of what this thing is going to do, what this commandlet is going to do. So you can use the what if, right? So here on the portal, when you want to create things, it's going to just help you validate it so you don't run into unnecessary errors at the middle of things, right? So it ensures that all the necessary validation would be checked. And this, once I go ahead to create it now, I should be good to go, right? So I'm going to go ahead and hit create. And in no time, we should have this resource group created for us. So as you can see here, you remember I spoke to you about notifications. So you can see we're getting the notification here that our resource group has been created. So I can jump to the resource group from here, that's from the notification area here. So I can go ahead and open up the resource group and start to put things in it, right? Or I can do so from here, right? From my left pane here, click on resource group, and I can find the resource group that I'm looking for. If you work in an environment, perhaps you're new to this and you're trying to figure out how things work. Now you know a little bit of Azure and you want to check things out in your environment and you can't see the resource group that you've created. So it might be that you will need to select, look at this, you see. So this, the default is that it should only show resources that I have attached or inside that are assigned to these two subscription. So in this case, I'm not using these two subscription. I'm working with my Azure Pass. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see, so for that subscription, these are all the resource group that I have. And the one we just created now is here, test. Good. So that's how you create a resource group. Let's create one more, right? Let's attempt to create, this time I'm going to go to all services. And let's create, how about a virtual machine skill set? We can choose to create a virtual machine if you want, but let's just choose to go with a skill set. So I'll click on that skill set. So skill sets, by the way, if you're wondering what is it, right? Skill sets are groups of individual virtual machines that that you can configure and manage as a single unit, right? So it will help you to create set of identical virtual machines that you can automatically auto scale, right? So there are times when you work in an environment where there are times when you have heavy traffic going on. You have a lot of traffic on your servers, on your VMs that will be connecting to resources on the VM that you've provisioned. So it might make sense for you to use a skill set so that you can have rules that will automatically increase the resource that you have. A good one would be in the banking environment. Towards the end of the month, there's this end of month operation they usually carry out, so that they can submit some information to the central bank. So at that point in time, they have customers they're servicing, and they also have, so they're going to have a heavy load. So it makes sense at that period of time to scale up the system. So if ordinarily they have one very powerful virtual machine that is handling all the requests, so maybe at that time it will make sense that when the traffic or when the CPU utilization hits 70%, let it automatically add one more VM, to the pool, right? So it's better to be well prepared, to plan that ahead of time. So I can go ahead and create one VM. If I need to do that, it will mean that I will need to manually create another VM, set up a load balancer. Whereas you can plan ahead of time and say, let me use a skill set instead, and I'm going to set some conditions that would allow the particular virtual machine auto scale. So that's what a skill set is used for. So I'm going to go right ahead and click on create. All right, so again, select your subscription and the resource group. So you can choose an already existing resource group, or you can create one on the fly from here. We already created one. How about I use this one here, Azure Community. So I'm going to select that one to use. I need to give my virtual machine skill set a name. What name do we give this now? How about I call it Kazim DM skill sets. All right, so that's the name. I need to choose a region. Remember, I spoke to you about region, so it's showing up here again. Every resource or any resource that you're going to be creating will need to be attached to a region, right? Next is asking us for availability zone, right? So do you want availability zone, by the way, means do you want to enable high availability such that if there's a possibility that the data center that this VM or these VMs are going to reside in might go down, right? So if that happens, or it might even be the rack that is hosting this VM, the server that is on the rack that is hosting this VM. So for that reason, you might want to add some extra layer of redundancy to ensure that your multiple virtual machines are not going to be sitting on the same rack. You have them on different rack, or to make things even better, you have them across regions, right? So availability zone, that's how you handle that. So you can look up more information about that. So in this case, I'm going to work with none. Orchestration mode is another one. So which defines, you want to have some ways of, do you want to, if I have multiple virtual machines, for example, do you want to have them be uniform, or you want to be flexible with your availability? So let's have them be uniform in this case. Security type is another option that you can choose when you're creating your VM. So you have between standard, trusted launch virtual machine, and just recently they've also added confidential virtual machines. So you see, one thing about the cloud is that the cloud changes every so often. So you always need to put on your learning hat to make sure that you keep up with those changes in the cloud. So you might connect to the portal and find out that some things are not where they used to be, or there are additional services. So that's just synonymous to every cloud, and Microsoft Azure cloud is no different. So the basic or the standard security will give you those basic security that you need, that you need to protect your virtual machine. But if you know that you're working with a more mission critical machine, that virtual machine, and security is of the essence for you, right? Then you might want to go with this option here, trusted launch virtual machine. And if the virtual machine is super confidential, then you have a third option to choose from. So I'll go with standard. And next you have image, right? So here is where you get to select or choose the operating system that will run on that virtual machine that you're creating, right? So um, Windows, of course, we know is Microsoft, right? So it belongs to Microsoft, so that comes as a no-brainer, right? So you have different versions of Windows operating system that you can run. So if you wish, you can make it be Windows 11, you can make it be Windows Server 2022, Windows Server 2016. So just choose your option, so to speak, from here. And you know that Linux is also now a first-class citizen up on Azure, right? So if you want, you can select a Linux distro of your choice. So whether you want Ubuntu, you want SUSE, you want Red Hat Linux, you want Debian. So choose which of the Linux uh, operating system image works for you. So I'm just going to leave the default here. The architecture of the system is x64, is 64 bits, right? This option right here, Azure Sports Discount. So this sports discount is one way on Azure of saving cost. So when you are running Azure, or you have VMs running on Azure, one of the ways to save cost is by selecting this option here, Spot VM. But you have to use this with caution. So if you're going to be using it, then you have to be sure that those machines that you're using it for are not mission critical machines. Maybe you're using it for things like batch processing. So where you need multiple servers to come together to execute tasks. So that way, if one virtual machine goes down, it still doesn't affect it. It might just slow things down slightly. The reason I'm saying this is because when you choose this option, it means that Microsoft is going to give you VMs from their unallocated resources, compute resources that they have. But when customers, more customers that are paying Microsoft more need those resources, then your spot VM might be taken away, right? So that's the deal. So you have to make sure that you're using that with caution. Next is where you get to select your VM size, right? So what CPU power do you want to work with? What random access memory do you want it to have? How about the storage, right? So do you want to use SSD? Do you want to work with HDD? So you get to choose your options here, and it will also give you an hint with regards to cost, what the cost is going to look like. And by the way, if you're looking to watch cost, you want to tell how much you're going to be spending ahead of time, there's another tool that you can work with, is the Azure pricing calculator. So be sure to use that tool ahead of time. So you just come here to tick your options, and so that the process can be really fast. So I'll maintain the default here once again. So I'm going to choose the username. So, Windows machine or Linux machine will require a username. So there's no administrator like you used to have when you install, the regular Windows operating system on the physical server. The default super user account is going to be administrator. If you're using Linux, the default super account will be root. But here, you will need to explicitly type in your administrator user account. So I'm making mine Kazim now, and you need to also give it a password. Confirm your password. Remember that? Yeah. Good. So another option that we have here is licensing. So this is another way of saving cost yet again on Azure. We saw earlier on Spot VM. There's also licensing. So it's telling us that you can save up to 49% of your cost when you select this option. That is when you choose to take advantage of Azure hybrid benefits. Azure hybrid benefits means that if you're coming from on-prem environment into the cloud, you're looking to migrate some of your on-premises infrastructure into the cloud. So you want to spin up some VMs in the cloud, and you already paid for licenses, or the servers that you have on-prem have valid licenses, right? So you can bring those licenses with you to the cloud. So when you do that, then Microsoft will not be charging you for licensing fee. They're only going to be charging you for compute, so to speak, right? So these are the options, right? And you will notice there are a number of other tabs here that you need to click through. So you need to configure your disk. You need to configure networking. There's a scaling option because I'm using a scale set, right? There's management and so on and so forth, right? So this is not a session on how to create VM. So I'm just going to accept the default for all of those tabs and review my options. So let's see if those defaults are good enough. Awesome. So they are. So I can go right ahead and create this virtual machine scale set. So you see, that's how you spin up things. That's how you spin up stuff on Azure or using Azure Portal. So you can use your Azure Portal to create resources. You can use them to manage the resources that you have, right? So if this resource or this resource has been created, so I can always come to my resource group, select the resource group of choice, which in this case is Azure Community. It's still creating it. If I come to my notification, I can see what's going on. It's letting me know that the deployment is still in progress, right? So I can always come here and see what has been created and also manage it from here. So whether I want to stop the VM I want to manage the VM. I need to tweak the VM. I need to add some sort of orchestration to the VM, so I can do all of that from this blade that I have here. So that's Azure Portal for you in a nutshell, right? So next is Azure PowerShell. So that's another way of managing your resources on Azure or creating resources on Azure. So PowerShell is a command line interface and scripting language for Windows, right? So, and it has a lot of support, right? We have support for Linux. That's if you're running Linux. So PowerShell is supported on Linux. So if you happen to be an Office 365 person, all you know about is, yes, how to spin up your Office 365 services, how to work with Teams, so you can use PowerShell with it. And of course, PowerShell also come bundled with Azure. So you can do plenty of Azure management via PowerShell. So PowerShell truly shines when it comes to automation, right? So there are different benefits to using PowerShell, right? One of the benefits, we know it was introduced to Windows, right? Before Azure came up or came out, we've had Windows, and PowerShell was built into Windows, and everything that you do on your Windows machine. So even when you're using your server manager to perform those operations behind the scene will get converted to PowerShell commandlet and then get executed. And now we also have support for PowerShell on Azure. And by the way, Azure is not the only place outside of Windows that PowerShell is supported. I've said when you're working with Linux, it's supported on Linux. If you're using VMware, so you can work with PowerShell with VMware. So whether you're using Citrix or other products, there are many products out there that comes with support for PowerShell. So you see, if you're strong with PowerShell, if you know PowerShell and you find yourself in any of these environments, then you should feel very confident that your Azure skills, your Azure PowerShell skill can be put to use, right? So let's see some ways of using PowerShell. So let's do some PowerShell. So you're going to launch your PowerShell window. There are different ways, by the way, of doing it. There are several ways of managing Azure through PowerShell. One way would be to do it via a client-based PowerShell that runs on Windows. This operating system that I'm using right now, as you can see here, right, is Windows, right? You can use it on Mac, you can use it, download it, and use it on Linux PCs as well. So I have a Windows operating system, and I'm going to pull up PowerShell. Don't worry if you're using command prompt, right? So you can load command prompt and just type PowerShell to also launch PowerShell. It's the same, right? So this is one way. Another way of doing the same thing of using PowerShell would be to use it from within the portal itself, from within the Azure portal itself. So if I come here to the portal, as you can see here, you see I have next to my search, I have this Cloud Shell. So if I click on the Cloud Shell, it's going to load the shell. So there are two options to choose from. So you can use PowerShell or you can use your born again shell, your bash shell or PowerShell. So whichever one floats your boat. So you can see we can use it from the portal itself. So even if you're using that mobile app version, and I told you that you can also get a mobile version of this that you can use to manage your resources. So you can even use PowerShell from that mobile version as well. So those are the two ways of managing your Azure via PowerShell. So I prefer to go with this one. So the first thing you will need to do is to make sure if you're using it on your Windows system or your Linux system or your Mac system, you will need to download the module, right? You will need to install the module. And this is how you install the module, by the way. So just do install. You don't need to download that long process, right? You can do it from within the shell itself, right? So just type in install hyphen module, right? AZ, and you go ahead. But you might also want to just put this option here, this allow clubber. All right. Is I think, yeah. Allow Clover. So the Clover option allows for update or older commands to be replaced. So if you've installed Azure module on your system for a very long time, so there's a possibility that there are now newer commands. So those commands might need to be replaced with newer ones. So if you do this, is more like an upgrade, right? So you can install your Azure module with this command. So once you have internet access on your box, it's going to take just a few minutes to download all the necessary Azure module on your system, and you should be good to go, right? So the syntax for Azure, it has this verb noun structure, verb noun, verb noun. So the verb usually starts with things like gets, right? Verb dash noun. So I can say things like get services. So if I want to view all the services that I have on this local machine, this will get the job done for me. So you can see verb get. This is a noun, service. So the service can be things like services. It can be, it might be VM. So I want to get VM. I want to get my resource group. So any noun of your choice. So you see, it's a natural language. So it makes it easier for people to understand PowerShell. And it comes also bundled with all the necessary tools, that makes any powerful programming language out there. So, but because of the syntax, because of that, natural language syntax, the way it was put together makes it easier for people to learn. So this is an example of a command. If I press enter to this now, so you see, it's going to fetch me all the commands, or the commandlet is what it is called, right? CMDlet, commandlet, that all the services that is running on the system. So I can see some are stopped, some are running. So I might even re-engineer the command to where I want to view only running services. So I can pipe it and do some awesome things to it. And the cool thing with PowerShell is this: when you're coming from a Windows background, maybe all you're used to is command prompt. So you can come with the knowledge of command prompt as well. So if you have a background of Unix, so you have this thing called aliases in PowerShell, right? So aliases, there are a number of aliases in PowerShell that will allow you use those commands that you're used to. For example, if I have Windows background and I know that I want to view the content of a directory, to view content of a directory is dir, right? dir will view the content of my directory, right? Let me cancel out of there. If I have Linux background, to do that is going to be ls, right? Right. So, but the actual PowerShell commandlet to view the content of a directory is get child item. Get child item. Right. So you see, it's doing the same thing. So that's one other plus for using PowerShell. Those aliases, right? So if I want to let's go straight into creating resources now for Azure. I said the first thing you will need to do is to connect to your Azure tenant, right? So after you've connected to your Azure tenant, you connect to it by typing connect, this command here, connect hyphen AZ account. So that is how you connect. It's going to prompt you to sign in. So it will take your username, your password, and you'll be signed in. I'm already connected, right? So I don't need to reinvent the wheel here. So if I want to see all the resource group that I have, to do that, I'm going to say get dash AZ resource. And one cool thing is that you have command completion with PowerShell. I can just use tab to complete the command, but this is not what I want. I want to resource, tab, G, group, and tab, you see. So I can always use tab to complete my command, so it will limit my errors. So get AZ resource group. I want to view all the resource group that we have. So it will list out all the resource group that you have for you. If you're trying to, yes, so these are all the resource groups that we have. You might argue that this is not very nicely formatted. So if you want it to be better formatted, why not? You can, right? So I can do the same thing and do something like this and do pipe and do format table, right? Format table. So this is much better, right? So you see the resource groups that we have, the location, so you can see everything right in your face and you won't have to do a lot of scrolling. So if you want to create something, so it has to be, it's going to be new. If I want to create, let's say a VM, I'm going to say new AZ. How about we create a resource group first, right? To create a resource group, is going to be new AZ resource group, right? And then I'm going to use dash for, because there are some what do we call this now? When you're trying to use PowerShell, after the verb noun, right? So you also have another part of it that is called parameters, right? So there are some parameters that are optional. There are some parameters that are compulsory, to have. If I want to create a resource group, I'm not just going to say new AZ resource group. It will be wondering, okay, new AZ resource group. If I press enter, in fact, it will be kind enough to start asking you questions. Okay, what is the name of this resource group, right? So you put in the name and it will ask you which location do you want this resource group to reside in, right? So it's very helpful. But I know what I want already, so I'm just going to say name, right? The name of my resource group is Kazim RG, right? And if I want, I can do location as well. Location, how about we put this in East US, right? Let me think. I need to quote this, East US, right? Let's see. East US. Let me see the error. What is it saying? Location is East US is not valid. Okay. How about we do West Europe? All right, so not to worry. So I'm just going to look this up later because of time, right? But you get the picture here, so you can create. And let's do something, right? So let's use another thing. Perhaps I'm making some mistakes I shouldn't be making here. So let me do CLS to clear my screen again. How about we get help, right? Get help. I want to get help about new AZ, resource group. And the cool thing, I can do it with an example, right? So give me an example. So let's see if this works. So you see, he's saying it gives us some examples, blow by blow, so you can look through example number 1. See if it meets your need. New AZ resource group name, location. Okay, so I know a valid location now. So how about I go ahead to use this one here? So South Central US.
So I'm just going to copy that. So you can see PowerShell, very friendly, very easy to work with. So you don't have to memorize anything. So I'm going to call up my command again and the location, paste that in, and hopefully this should work fine. Awesome. So we created our resource group. Likewise, if you want to create a virtual machine as well, to create a virtual machine is new AZVM, and then you can put the necessary parameters. Remember, if you don't know what those parameters are, you can leverage on help, just like I did. Get help, space, new VM with examples. So all you need to do is scroll through the examples, copy it, and you can use it to your heart content. So that's PowerShell in brief. I mentioned you can do what if as well. Let me just show you that real quick. I want to create this. You know, sometimes you want to work with scripts. You want to work with lines of code. So this is not the best place to do scripts, right? So to do scripts, there's another version of it. I'm going to leave you to look that up. It's called PowerShell ISE, right? So it's a scripting environment that allows you to script in, in a window where you can press enter, have line 1, line 2. So that's more easier for you to script because you're going to be writing the script or the code in multiple lines, not just one line like you're seeing me do here, right? So this might not be this bare bone PowerShell might not be the best tool to use when you want to write scripts. So instead, leverage on PowerShell ISE. If you're going to be using it, by the way, from here, you're going to be using it from PowerShell, from a Cloud Shell, and you want to script, this is it, right? So click on this, yes, this icon here, this icon, open editor. So, and then you can start to write your script, start to declare your variables, my username, and then, my password, my connection string. So you can write your script here. So if you want to do it here, there is a PowerShell ISE that you can look up in Windows. So let me show you what if real quick. So I'm not sure what this command does. So I can just simply do a switch and put what if, right? And it's performing the operation, replacing yes. So it's going to, because I already have that resource group, so it replaced it. So it will tell me that, oh, this is going to create this thing for us. If you want to run a script, but you want it to always notify you when you're running scripts, you can use another switch here called confirm. So confirm will simply ask you, are you sure you really want to do this? Or do you want it, are you sure you want to? You can suspend it, you can say yes to it, you can say no to it. So that there are other things I would have loved to show, but because of time. So let's just quickly touch on the last one. That's Azure CLI. Azure CLI. So CLI is Azure Client, right? Is a short for Azure Client. So it's similar to the old, people that are used to Windows CMD. But the cool thing with Azure CLI is that it can run on Bash, that's born again shell. It can run on top of PowerShell as well. So you can run it on both. So you see here, from this, my shell here. But let me clear the screen real quick. Let me close it and reopen it. All right, so you see now the focus is on PowerShell. But if you like, you can switch it to born again shell. So it's going to be the same. So it's telling me to confirm that I want to switch to Bash shell. So whether you are in Bash environment or you are in PowerShell environment, it doesn't matter. So your Azure CLI command still works, right? So let's take a look at the syntax in this case. Every command that you're going to be typing begins with AZ. AZ is a short for Azure, right? And one thing you're going to notice if you're using it from within the portal is that it comes with IntelliSense built in. So if you're using it on command prompt, there's a way to bring up the IntelliSense to start letting the IntelliSense means that it's going to be prompting you. Is it this command that you want? And then you just use space to complete the command, or you just use your arrow keys to complete the command. So every command starts with AZ. So if I'm looking to create a VM, it is AZ space VM, right? VM. And I want to create a VM, I'm going to take create. And the parameters here, when you're using your parameters, you don't just create a VM, right? You need the name of the VM. You need to put a resource group. You need to put the VM in a resource group. So you need the name of the resource group. You need an image, right? So those are parameters that you need to pass in. So to supply your parameters, you're going to use double dash, right? Dash dash resource group, resource group, right? It is resource dash group. And I'll put my resource group name, right? And resource group test, let's say. And if I need to give the virtual machine a name, dash dash name, and I'll give the virtual machine a name. If I want an image, dash dash image, you get the picture here. So those are arguments that you will need to pass in. Let's do a quick one. Let's create a resource group, right? So I'm going to do AZ group create. So this is how you create a resource group, right? AZ group create. So you need those parameters, right? The first parameter would be dash dash name. So what is the name of this resource group? Let's call it test2, right? Dash dash location. What's the location of this resource group? So you give it a location, right? And this is how you, let's do West US, if this is correct. So let's press enter. Sorry. Let me do AZ group list. All right. So AZ group create. All right. For time, right? So you can check that out. So it is AZ group create. And if you need to delete, AZ group delete. And here too, you can get help. You don't have to memorize anything, right? So if I need help here too, I'm going to type AZ dash dash help. Help is your friend, right? So it tells you all the things that you can do with, let's wait for it. Yes, so these are all the commands that you can use. So you can just get help. If I want to create the resource group, you saw earlier I gave an error, or I want to create a virtual machine, but I'm not sure, what parameters to pass in. Help is your friend, always remember. So I can do AZ VM dash dash help and press enter. Right, so it's going to tell you all the things that you need to do. So just scroll through the list and then start picking your options one by one. Do you want to create? So if I say create and get help, it tells me what to do next, right? So that is the 3 ways of managing your Azure resources and creating resources up on Azure that we're going to be touching on today. It would have been nice if there was, more time, maybe to whet your appetite a little bit about the last one. but that's where I'm going to call it a close now, so that I can take perhaps some of your questions. So wrapping up, we looked at Azure administration tools, and we focused, like I mentioned, on three of them: Azure Portal, Azure PowerShell, and Azure CLI. So if you have any question, I can take your questions now, perhaps maybe a few of them. Suraj, are there questions for me?
So I think there is no question, but I did see someone who was raising hand during the session. So let's give them 1 second or 1 minute to type that question up, since there is no access for the mic directly. So they will
Oh,
need
okay.
to type it up. So
Okay. Okay, so I can see some are asking about the certificate of attendance. Okay, the difference, all right, I'll just quickly attend to this now. Explain the difference between cloud PowerShell and the normal PowerShell. All right, so here is the deal. PowerShell is what it is, right? So PowerShell comes bundled with, or you can apply modules to PowerShell to make it to extend the functionality of PowerShell. So what you need to do to it is add modules to it. So if I have this one that I use right now is PowerShell on Windows, right? So by default, it would be able to perform Windows operation, like viewing the services of Windows. But if this were to be a Windows server, if I make this a Windows Server 2019, let's say, and I install Active Directory on it. So the regular PowerShell cannot manage Active Directory. So I'm going to have to install Active Directory module to the system so that I can start carrying out Active Directory task. I can start typing in, it will start to support Active Directory commandlet. So it would import the Active Directory commandlet, and I can use it to manage Active Directory. Likewise, if I want to use it to manage SharePoint, I need to import the SharePoint module. If I want to use regular PowerShell to manage Azure, I'm going to install Azure module. So the difference here is the module that it has, your PowerShell has. So if I do get module, so you see, these are all the module that I have here. So if I do get AZ module, so you get the picture here. So you can get, if depending on what you want to use the PowerShell for, be sure to download the module, import the module, and you should be able to use it for what you need to use it for. So that's what the difference is between the two. All right, so if there are no further questions, I think we can wrap up here. So you can reach out to me again. My email, a.kazim@iconsystems.com. You can connect with me on Twitter. So it's Kazim Can Teach on Twitter, and you can find me on LinkedIn as well. So it's Kazim Adeboyega. And if you'd like to learn more about Azure, by the way, I have a course up on LinkedIn. So you might want to also check that out, right? So if you're new to Azure, so I cover just basics of Azure, how to set up a subscription, how to protect your resources, how to save cost on Azure. So those were just the elementary that I covered in that particular course up on LinkedIn Learning. So be sure to check that out.
Okay, if you have the links, that should be great. Like if you can just share it quickly. And
Oh, okay. Just 1 minute.
again, thank you, Kazim, for the session. And it was wonderful. It was really resourceful. I hope everyone here was able to grasp it and it was helpful for them as well. And thank you again for uh, everyone who joined with us today. Thank you for giving the 1 hour of your time to learn something new. And I would like to repeat that there is going to be a certificate of participation, and I have shared the forms in the chat box. You can fill it out, and we'll be sending it out tomorrow only. So please have the patience, and we'll make sure everyone who filled it out will receive it. And the recording will be shortly available in our YouTube channel.
All right, so here's the course, Introduction to Azure Subscription and Resource Management. So let me upload it and put the link in. Right, so I've dropped it in the chat now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Please make sure you check it out and give him a follow on LinkedIn as well, so that you can reach out to him about regarding anything else. Okay. Thank you again, Kazim, for the session, and thank you all for joining.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
I'll be ending the session now. Okay.